Okay, welcome to Athens City Council. It's about 7 o'clock on September 12th. This is a meeting night when council will be meeting in committee sessions. We have 3 committees that are meeting tonight. Planning and Development, which will begin in just half a minute here, the Arts and Recreation Committee, and Finance and Personnel. It's been probably 6 weeks since we've had committee meetings. We have quite a long agenda, so we're going to try and move it fairly rapidly. The first item on the Planning and Development Committee meeting is a report to us from National Church Residences, developers for the proposed retirement center on Stimson Avenue. They would like to come to us and update us on what's been happening with that project in the almost 2 months since we've spoken with them last. This is not a meeting at which we will have intense discussions which might lead to an ordinance. We hope to schedule that meeting soon. This is really just a let's listen to the information. If council members have pertinent questions, please feel to answer them, but we're not going to get into a lot of give and take tonight. I see that coming in the near future. Same with audience members. If you have something that can't wait, certainly it's an open meeting, but we'll have a chance for a more full discussion in 2-3 weeks, okay? NCRC, go ahead.
Members of Council, my name is Jerry Kwiat, Chief Operating Officer for National Church Residences Healthcare. Over the past 2 years, we've been working with a wonderful and vibrant group of Athens residents interested in the provision of a continuing care retirement community in this region. The journey has involved discussions with Ohio University and several public meetings with residents of Athens, students, business owners, and City Council. We at NCR feel the process has been thorough and beneficial to us as developers in an effort to come to a resolution that best serves this community. Since we began this process, NCR has been busy across the country opening 10 new facilities for affordable and middle-income seniors with an additional 18 under development. We have initiated expansion of all 5 of our healthcare properties, including the opening of 2 new home healthcare agencies serving over 150 people daily. The NCR board is committed to quality growth. We've been busy on many fronts, as have each of you. Despite our growth, the project here in Athens remains a priority for our organization. We believe the need for it remains and will remain. We respect your thoroughness and stand ready to build a project that will serve the citizens in a way that will add value to the community at large. I wanted to take just a minute to describe the project as it has been planned. The emphasis of the facility is independent living with the availability of supportive services. The project would have a total of 151 units, 115 or 76% as 1- and 2-bedroom apartments with 4 cottages. A 36-unit assisted living facility would be available and be built to nursing home construction, safety, and space requirements. Residents would have access to home health care, rehabilitative therapy, and other specialized services such as hospice should the need arise. No, we do not have licensed nursing home beds in this project. It would be our desire to add a small number of nursing home beds if and when they become available in the future. We maintain, however, that a full array of services will be available on the site. A continuum of care will exist. No, we initially will have no Medicaid reimbursement, and Medicare coverage for services would be through home health care agency. You've heard me on more than one occasion use the term lifestyle choice. National statistics demonstrate that in a market rate independent housing project, the majority of residents who enter the community are 75 years of age and over, and generally over 50% are single. We anticipate many couples, some in their 60s, may choose this accommodation, but would doubt that it would be the majority. Our emphasis remains on an independent lifestyle aided by facilities for exercise, restaurant-style dining, and a superb location. The access to assisted living, home health, and memory care Alzheimer's services are healthcare support primarily for those who have selected an apartment for their long-term residence. I have heard much discussion and read a little more in the Athens Messenger about University Estates. I personally have known the president of healthcare facilities out of Lima for over 20 years. Jim Unverfurth is a good man and is a leader in the healthcare field. From what I can discern, the project sounds exciting and should meet many needs in the community through upscale homes and a state-of-the-art nursing facility. We simply suggest that our proposed facility meets different needs, and I believe could effectively coexist with our neighbors at University Estates. Most of our previous discussions have centered around the site and its suitability for development. We respectfully request that as we endeavor to answer the remaining concerns in this area, that Council consider a resolution allowing us to proceed. We believe that our proposed facility will be an asset to the Athens community and the citizens it serves. We thank you for your continual consideration of its merits. Now I would like to ask George Berardi of Berardi Partners Architects and John Renicky, project engineer from EMHT, to describe the results of soils testing and flood modeling that have been conducted over the last 6 weeks. First, we'll ask Josh to step forward. Good.
Good evening. I will try to keep this relatively free of technical jargon for those of you that are here. Our task as part of this project was to utilize a floodplain model developed within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers HEC-RAS modeling software. The model was developed by the Army Corps. We were suggested at the direction of the City of Athens to use the Army Corps' most recent modeling of the Hocking River. And through the analysis of that model, we are able to alter the cross sections of the stream of the river as they cross through the NCR site. And with that modeling, we are then able to represent the proposed fill that would be necessary to elevate the structures above the 100-year flood elevation. And then from that, assess the impact, if any, on the 100-year flood elevations due to the fill being placed in the floodplain. Through our analysis, which is detailed in a report, which I have multiple copies here of for those on City Council who would like to review it, I also have copies of the electronic modeling itself on CD-ROM disk that I will happily provide as well for the City Council and City administrative staff to review. Through that analysis, again, which is summarized in the report, which includes mapping of the area, the increase in 100-year water surface elevations is 0.02 feet, which is approximately a quarter inch. And that's the only impact from this particular project. And that's really about all we've got from the technical modeling analysis. And again, we have copies of the report that we can provide in both hard copy and electronic format. And I'll now hand it over to Mr. George Berardi. Oh, we do also, as part of the technical written report, have mapping that was initially provided by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It is a GIS formatted map, which was prepared then by folks at EMH&T that actually got their geography masters from Ohio University. So when I said I was coming down here, they were asking for me to look for people that they knew so I could say hello for them. So again, this mapping is provided here for brief review and in every copy of the report that we will hand off to the council. Thank you.
Members of council, I'm George Berardi. The primary emphasis of our involvement since the last time was really to analyze the basic structure involved, and one of the primary elements necessary for us was to obtain soils analysis. So we completed a soils investigation of the entire area of the site where we would have our building, and it was primarily related to the corners of the buildings associated with areas close to easements, but primarily the corners where there was some concern previously with regard to subsurface impact of the superimposed loads that we're talking about. Effectively, geotechnical consultants of Columbus, again, completed a variety of tests. Number one, soils borings, exactly as they were asked to in the locations of the building, and completed some additional soils analysis, reviewed soil structure, obviously, as part of their complete study for us. Their conclusion was that we do have some not very good soils in some areas of the building pad. And much as I had discussed during previous meetings and presentations, it isn't unusual to have a site where we have to modify the structure consistent with the soil type that we have. What Geotechnical Consultants has provided for us are 5 or 6 different methods of treatment of the foundations, or providing suggestions of the foundation type that could be used without modifying the soil structure. One of the things that they did suggest was, rather than increasing some of our costs by developing greater structure to be able to sustain the superimposed loads, is to simply remove some of the soils and replace them with compactable materials. So there are a number of methods that are available to us. Number one, as I said, would be to remove some of the unusable soils and replace them with suitable fills. Same quantities, but usable fills that could be compacted to levels that the superimposed loads would be, or that would be able to support the superimposed loads, or come back in with a variety of foundation systems. I'll mention several: large spread footings, caissons, pilings. It isn't unusual on buildings of this nature to have pilings. Effectively, you would have pilings at critical points in the building, and then you would span between the pilings. For example, if the pilings were located at 25 feet on center, you would span between those with what we refer to as grade beams, which are large concrete structures that span between the pilings, and then we build our building on top of that. So again, as I indicated in previous meetings, there are means and methods by which we can develop suitable structural systems consistent with the soils, or again, as I said, replace the soil. With that, I would leave it open to questions.
Okay. Thank you all for your succinct presentation and responding to the concerns that we last spoke about. Again, I'll remind you that this is not intended to be an in-depth meeting that will follow soon. However, if there are some questions that we need to ask now, council members, questions, comments, quickly, Paul?
Status of the drainage plan?
Drainage,
We're talking about a drainage plan?
rainwater?
Yes.
Okay. Is there, we can,
The drainage plan wasn't completed at this point, but we could complete a drainage plan by the next meeting. The primary emphasis of this meeting was to present
Right.
these studies that were produced. But we will produce a drainage
Okay.
plan as well.
to come?
I guess there are several other things that we had raised during the work session and in earlier meetings, and I guess that would be the same status, like the access for the Red Cross to their building, the need for the sewer easements, and how you'll be planning to address that are two that are at the top of my list.
Well, as I indicated during our last meeting, and forgive me, I don't recall the exact date of that meeting, but I think that we talked about providing, there's actually documentation in your files which addresses each of those issues, and the access to the Red Cross was one of them, to where we would provide an access easement without restriction. With regard to sewer easements, there are sewer easements that exist, and we will stay away from the sewer easements. I think that what we've provided is a plan which essentially comes back off the sewer easements, or our buildings come off the sewer easements. And again, given the foundation system that we could apply to this project, we wouldn't have any impact on the lines within the sewer easements. I know that there was some discussion at some point about developing easements that were 50 or 60 feet wide. That would be most unusual. I mean, I'm used to secondary roads being 50 and 60 feet wide and right-of-way, but I've not seen an easement, I apologize, that's 60 feet wide. I don't think it's necessary. I think that the one thing that needs to be a concern that should be addressed should be, will the loads of any buildings that we apply work in concert with the location of the utility within that easement. Effectively, if I have an easement that's 20 feet wide and I have a sewer that's 10 feet deep, I would not impact that sewer in any way if I built even right up to the easement, especially if I modified the structural system of the building. If I applied pilings or caissons where I would take my building loads below the level of the sewer, there wouldn't be any impact whatsoever on the sewer. Those evaluations haven't been completed, but again, the sewer easements are of record. They are of record and they exist today, and we will continue to work within the parameters of those sewer easements as they exist. There are no encroachments whatsoever within the existing sewer easements.
We might clarify that perhaps the 60 came out of the report from our own workers who said it wasn't ours. So
Yeah.
once we get the results of your boring information, we'll send it back to them and find out if there's any change in that. That's
Yes.
fundamentally
Yeah, and
that's where it came from, not from us.
And we agree in principle as to what the reason. Again, yeah, you reported what workmen in the field may have said rather than what structural engineers, and I appreciate that, but all that given that reason that, we will consider the structure and the loading and where we distribute those loads, that's most critical. If we distribute the loads effectively below the sewer line, there wouldn't be any impact of the loads laterally to the sewers.
I think some of their comments were with regards especially to work easements. If they needed
Right.
to work on the lines at a certain depth, would the buildings be too close? But again, we're not here to discuss that. I think people are just reminding you of points that they are concerned about.
Right.
Anybody over here? Dave?
This is an issue that I have heard referenced sort of in the conversation, but I think people are, despite the quarter-inch calculation, I think people are still concerned about displacement and displacement of water in a flood event. So it would be my suggestion that we take the fill out of the documented area of the 100-year. That doesn't necessarily mean the site, because I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense, given the way the site's configured, but I would imagine that the floodplain itself is vast enough that the fill that you need to get could be retrieved out of the plane, out of the floodplain, and so we're not talking about not fill that would have already been taken out anyway. But you see where I'm going with this?
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
sort of a net no displacement?
Right. The
Okay.
displacement is a function of some projections. The projections were based on some fairly, we talked about just a moment ago about the drainage plan. And there is some analysis that's already been completed which addresses, roughly where would the finished floor elevation of this be.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't do complete modeling to show how the site drains. We know that if we have our finished floor elevation at a given level, and the site is at an average of what it is, we know that it will work. But a detailed grading and drainage plan
Yeah.
will have to be produced.
Yeah.
So the modeling was based on the amount of fill to raise the building, not 2 feet. By the way, we have to be mindful that we had agreed to take the building, rather than 1 foot out of the floodplain, 2 feet. So we've
Right.
added some impact soils which affect our increased elevation that contribute to that quarter inch of water,
Yes.
if you will. So I agree with you. I think it's worth analysis to see if there is a possibility to reduce that to a net zero. I don't think that I'd want to take the building back to 1 foot. I'm very comfortable with the building being at 2 feet above floodplain, as we all agree.
Right, right.
Excuse me.
Well, I hope you're able to do that, and I think if we consider the floodplain in a very, it's been mapped relatively authoritatively, so we kind of know where it is, and it extends outside the city. I mean, so I guess I'm just talking about the net displacement and thinking of the floodplain in a very sort of large way, not just localized. That's all. I think I made my point.
Yeah, I think, if you don't mind, maybe Josh can add to it, if you would.
It's
It's
up to
you.
the chair. I'm satisfied that I've communicated to you. I
Thank you.
didn't think we
We
wanted to
can
get
read it.
into it right now.
Okay. And with that in mind, are there audience members who feel they need to speak tonight? Or, again, we will be having a more open discussion soon. Our task from here is to discuss among ourselves, not tonight, but in the future, is to discuss among ourselves what issues are most important, in some way come to develop a proposed ordinance that then would go through 3 readings of more discussion, possibly amendments, eventually leading to a vote on this question. But I see that as still quite a process to go through. And we will have a much more open discussion within a couple weeks, I think. Yes, if you have something to say, please come to the microphone.
I just want to make sure that the.
No, please, you really need to do that, so people, we can't hear you without the microphone.
I just request,
Your name and address.
Chris Fall, and I live on Morris Avenue. I request that all the reports that have been produced with the soil boring and the HEC model be in the library, along with all updated maps and plans, because the plans have not been updated since March or February. So I want, so that everybody can look at it, including the CD, please.
In the public, they'll certainly be available here, but I
No,
think we can arrange to have it at
We
the
need
at
in the library, because this is hard to
Okay.
get to for people who.
Okay. Thank you, good point, thank you. Okay, again, thank you, gentlemen, for addressing these issues. I will be in touch shortly to schedule our next meeting.
Not to belabor the point, but the last set of documents, which are of record, are dated June, I believe. It's mid-June, not February or March.
I think she's saying that the newest ones in the library are actually February, so.
Oh, well,
So
okay.
that, in other words, June's not there, I think. is what
Yeah,
she's saying.
well, but June is here.
Well,
Okay.
June is
Found
passed.
people using GIS and.
We'll correct that.
All right, thank you.
And I would, yes, I'd like to see some of that data. I'll
Okay.
think about electronic and papers. Thank you.
So who did you see?
I suspect that several of you came for this discussion. We're going to move on very quickly to discussion of a lot split on Glen Drive. If you want to leave, give us a minute here to, no, I'm talking to Mr. Moritz there.
Thank you. I'll make you a copy of this unless you want to make me a copy.
Sounds like a good idea. Who's the, your engineer guy right there? Okay, can I ask you a question? Camera?
On this
Ask
Moritz
him who,
thing,
which of our
she give
students
you
he's got.
what?
Nancy will burn a copy of the CD.
First of all, Nancy wants to know which student did
She
work.
was going to make some copies. I don't know how much she made.
Okay.
Okay, the other thing, what, HEC-RAS, does that do
Okay.
flow? Or
You
does
got
it
a
just do?
picture?
I believe the mayor must have some, don't you think? Ask him. Do you have, Rick? Ask him if he has one.
I was, one of the concerns I
Rick.
have people is that you're gonna
Rick.
have this hill.
Do you
up
have
at
one
the
of these?
top. You know, here's your built-up area here. Here's the river going this way.
remember
Now,
seeing-
the river floods. You've got this 2 feet above elevation.
Yeah.
The east side, Morris Avenue is below. Does this create a crest right here where it's gonna go this way?
Okay, we're about to move on to our next topic here, thank you.
I just wanted to model it. Okay. I think your crowd speaks. Thanks.
We have
They may go back without you and you'll be sorry.
a recommendation from the Athens City Planning Commission. We're in receipt of a recommendation from the Athens City Planning Commission to approve a lot split on Glen Drive, which is a private road off of the Far Hills, Fullview Heights. I'm sorry, I always get Fullview Heights subdivision at the corner of Route 50 and Radford Road. This has been discussed at the Regional Planning Commission and the City Planning Commission, and now it's come to us for discussion and approval through an ordinance. The person requesting this is Mr. Moritz, and I'm going to have him come up. Members have received a small packet and a not very clear picture of the site in question, so we'll let Mr. Moritz speak for a couple minutes, and then we'll
You have to fill the time.
ask questions.
Here we go.
This is the whole packet.
Here, 2, 1.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, City Council. My wife and I are requesting a lot split of our property, which is located at 5686 Glen Drive in Alexander Township in the subdivision of Fullview Heights. Our property is within the 3 miles limit of the city of Athens, therefore, that's why I'm here. The property is located on the public right-of-way easement known as Glen Drive. It consists of 7.5 acres in our private residence. Over the last 15 years, a portion of our property, 2.5 acres approximately, has functioned as a second residence. The 2.5 acre portion has all of the utilities installed, including septic, water, gas, phone, and electric. This section is also addressed by the U.S. Postal Service as 5690 Glen Drive. Recently, the mobile home located there was removed. It was my mother's residence for the last 15 years. And at this time, it's our intent to divide our property and sell the primary residence with 5 acres, more or less, and if possible, build a home on the remaining 2.5 acres. We have to date obtained a positive vote by the Athens County Planning Commission, the Athens City Planning Commission, and the Athens County Health Department. In this packet that I handed you, it goes through those different public entities, and within the verbiage of that documentation, it spells out the motion passed in the different groups. We've also met the stipulations requested by these entities. One being a road maintenance agreement must be in place and signed by the residents of Glen Drive, and we now have that. The maintenance agreement must also have language stating that within the described 50-foot easement, further public utilities will be allowed, and we've gotten that. The residents of Glen Drive must also approve of my plan to split my lot and understand that there will be no further splits off from this private road. It's actually a public road, but it's not a public road that's maintained by any government, the township or the county or the city of Athens doesn't maintain this property. Therefore, that's why we needed the road maintenance agreement, and like I said, we have that. And lastly, we also needed the health department's approval. With the health department, they did approve the lot split based on us upgrading one of the septic systems. And within this packet, I've got 2 separate estimates for having that upgrade done, at which time it's not done at this time. I was directed not to do that by Bob Eichenberg yet. He said not to go ahead and put the money into it until I got an affirmative vote. So that's basically what I have. We would like to split our property and sell our private residence we live in now and build a new home. The impact to Glen Drive would not be any more of an impact than what we have experienced over the last 15 years. No increase in traffic on the road, and the continual maintenance and upkeep by the residents, which hasn't been a problem for the entire time that we've lived there. And now with the road maintenance agreement that's been signed by all the residents, they're fully aware that it is our responsibility to maintain the road, and they have no problem in doing so.
Okay, thank you. Council members, questions? Paul?
So the right-of-way is Glen Road is, Glen Drive is 50 feet wide, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And how long is it?
Oh, Glen Drive, it's probably,
Okay, I'm looking at this map here. Is this where it comes off like that? It says public access.
If I could,
This is a little bit lighter map than you gave us, but
yeah, Glen Drive comes from right here. This
Okay.
is Fullview Heights Road.
Okay.
Down and around this turn, and then follows the property line right up through here, and it actually is encompassed by this 50-foot easement.
okay.
And it joins back up. It's actually has access to Fullview Heights Road on both ends.
Okay.
But is that other end actually developed?
No, it's not. It was at one time, but it's degraded. My intent would also be, because that would be part of the property that we would retain, part of the 2.5 acres, and our intent would be to upgrade that road to a very passable condition. It was determined by all of the residents that they really didn't want to go public with the road. They have their reasons, but they would really rather not go public with the road. There's some questions about rental properties and different things like that, all of the residents would just as soon as stay private.
But you crossed out private and put public in, so
Yeah,
that means that we could drive out and
Oh,
look
yeah,
at this lot?
yeah. Private meaning not maintained by the,
Yeah, I understand the difference, I thought, yeah. Other comments or
I
questions?
just have one quick question. Would this be permitted by the Fullview Heights subdivision? I mean, do you have any deed restrictions in your, that would prohibit this split?
No.
Okay,
Fullview Heights is a fairly older
yeah.
subdivision, and I don't believe that at that time there were very many restrictions involved in doing subdivisions back then.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Anybody else? I had a couple questions about the maintenance agreement. They were saying that it needed to say that there will be no future lot splits allowed off of here. I don't see that language. Maybe-
That ended up being in the split agreement,
Okay.
and
Oh, okay, I see.
it's actually the very last sentence in the split agreement. It simply states, also, according to the Athens County Planning Commission, this would be the final lot split allowable on Glen Drive until such time as it becomes a publicly
I just didn't go
maintained
far.
road.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And are there only like 3 signatures here? Is that all the property owners, or is this still a work in progress?
No, it's completed. There's 3 signatures on this one, and the following sheet is a faxed. The property owner doesn't live here, and I had to fax this to him, and he signed it and faxed it back. And at the time that I faxed that to him, there was already the first signature on it, so
Okay.
just the second signature
Okay.
is the one that counts. And it's the same thing with
With the other one?
with the maintenance agreement.
I couldn't read any of them.
The signatures?
Yeah. Must mean they're legal.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Audience, have anything to say? Committee members, council members, shall we go ahead with that?
Let's go.
Okay, what we'll do is have an ordinance prepared, and we'll read it for the first reading a week from today. And then there will be 3 readings, basically 2 weeks apart.
Okay,
But we'll begin next Monday.
okay.
And if you want to come then to answer any other questions that might have come up, that's probably a good idea.
Okay. And this has been a learning experience for me over the past several months. I've learned a lot about county and city government, and it's very interesting. So I guess my question now would be, because I just don't know a lot about where things go from here. I don't do this all the time. So from here, we'll read it at 3 city council meetings,
Yes.
and then it'll be voted on?
And then it'll be voted on, and if we vote to approve it, then it is done. That's
Okay.
the end of it.
30 days later.
At least from our side, I mean, essentially, you were going to have to technically split the lots, right? I mean,
Yeah,
officially.
then he begins the work and he can
The septic
repair
system
the
in.
septic system and do all that.
Is there, after the vote, and if it's an affirmative vote, is there a 30-day waiting period?
Yes, there would be.
Okay. Okay, and at the end of the 30-day waiting period, would I be notified that whether there had been any referendums or not?
We could make a note that the clerk would do that. Once it's voted on, I don't see that there would be any other changes, but we can certainly do that. We'll follow that up and make sure the clerk lets you know. Yes.
Do you have a time concern with trying to get work done on the septic system or anything in particular? Because that might be a health and safety issue.
We could make
We could make it, we could,
an emergency clause which would remove the 30-day waiting period.
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
I do have a time concern
Okay.
Yeah.
involved here.
Okay, that, yeah. Councilmember Phillips makes, that is a health issue, so, from the health department, so, okay. That's, when we draft an ordinance, there'll be that emergency clause, which simply removes the 30-day waiting period.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Our next item on the agenda, who knows what it is water line expansion on Peach Ridge.
Okay.
Councilmember Bain.
Just as we have a procedure for subordination of leases, we have a procedure for water taps. And we have requirements that are spelled out in earlier ordinances. And a woman named Karen Bald on Peach Ridge, on a lot that's between the Patton and the Ball lot, is requesting water service. A bit of history on this would be that at one point, we did serve that Sunday Creek with water, so the line goes on the street in front of the house. We are not in competition with Sunday Creek at that point. I think we've kind of divided the territory. You might think that we should encourage them to annex into the city, but the sewer is a problem on that side of the road. It may happen eventually. So what we ask is that the administration take a look and send out the people who have the expertise, the people in this, did the test on the line, and they found that it will not degrade the service on the property line. And so I can say, having the recommendation of Ray Hazlett from August 29th, that we would grant this tap because there is no other option for these people other than possibly a cistern. And that's not a reasonable option at this point, especially not this year. So if there are no objections, I would like to put up an ordinance for Karen Bald for a water tap on Peach Ridge.
Nancy?
Yep.
So the other water system doesn't exist there anymore, is that what you're saying?
No, we have the line that goes through the road.
We took the line
does-
over.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the line that goes, there's like a, it was a transition that happened some years ago, maybe 20.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And did you say that the people on both sides ever have city water?
Oh, yes, all along that road, yes,
It's very
absolutely.
similar to the one we did on Old Coach.
Yes,
about a year
very,
ago.
very similar to Old Coach. Yeah, we actually will not expand except if they meet these characteristics, and the administration spoken with Ray Hazlett speaking for them, recommended this, that we approve this. Anybody have any problems with it? Okay, there'll be an ordinance up on next Monday. Second thing on my agenda is a continuation of the city plan. After we had our city plan meeting, citizens continued to meet together. I guess reflecting the reality that Athens is certainly an unusual place. Well, not only did we have 8 times as many people out for our meetings, but we also have citizens that are interested enough that they continue to meet. There's the transit group, the bicycle people, and now we have the open space people. So, a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago, just before school started, I met with them and I listened to what they had to say, and now I'm going to let them speak and talk about what their concerns are. He can hand some more paper. I actually gave them a copy of it. Thanks. Introduce yourself, give your name and address, please.
My name is Milt Greek. I live at 17 Hanlon Avenue. I'm part of a group of citizens that formed after the last public meeting for the Athens Comprehensive Plan back in November of last year, I believe. And we are looking into ways that we can help implement the plan, especially as it pertains to open space, green space, and environmental protection for the riverways and view spaces, things like that. We've been meeting and we're continuing to meet. And one of the things that happened was that we came to understand that recently there's been some difficulties with the definition of open space as it presently exists. And we thought that we would try a crack at to see if there was any way that we could help with that. What you have in this handout is the cover page is introduction to who we are and the listing of the pages. The first page after the cover page explains what the current code changes, what needs are for the changes, we understand it, the proposed definition, and suggested changes. The attachment A that follows page 1 is a change of the open space plan, and page 2 is the rationale that we have for these changes based on our understanding of the comprehensive plan goals. The open space question becomes quite technical in places about permeability and how you define permeability, and we have some discussion there. I regret that we don't have some information here that you can contact us if you have some further questions about what we meant by some of these statements. But in any case, you could either email me through greek@ohio.edu or contact Nancy Bain or Paul Weil, and they can connect you with us. We don't mean to write code for you. We simply want to offer this for your review to see if maybe it will help with things. And if that is the case, then we appreciate our ability to be of aid to the city.
Thank you. I'm struck by your remark about writing code for us. It strikes me that we've not been very good at it when we tried it, so any help we can get. I'm thinking about housing code things and all that stuff.
Yes.
Every once in a while we're good, but sometimes we're not so good, so.
Well, it's a difficult
Thanks.
job. Thank you.
And code arises from the concerns and needs of the citizens, so, I mean, that's great that you come with us and with suggestions, too, so.
Well, hopefully they'll be worthwhile.
So the process would be that if we would decide to send this after people have a chance to read and absorb it, we'd send it to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
At that point, wouldn't we? That would be our procedure. So we can't promise you Thanksgiving, I don't think.
Sure.
So it'd be a resolution to,
Just if we decide to
Change, yeah.
ask them to consider it.
okay.
You want to read it, or we'll read it and then decide at the next
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah,
I'd like to take-
please.
Okay, it's your committee meeting now. Okay.
Do you plan to?
Who's in charge?
I would
Sorry.
just add that when I brought forth the proposal of rezoning the floodway as open space, the Planning Commission did have a rather extensive discussion of open space definitions. And I have some other documents, a memo that was from Wayne Key about some definitions, and also some stuff from Bob Eichenberg when I was initially talking about that. And I'd be happy to make copies of this information also to toss into the hopper. You can just see what the Planning Commission has already talked about.
So in a couple of weeks, we will have the meeting after people have had a chance to digest all of this, and we'll
That's great.
notify you, Milt.
Okay,
So you can come
thank
back
you.
if you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
for,
much.
thanks for being, for the citizen input. We appreciate that.
Have a nice night.
Thank you. One more issue for Councilmember Bain, solid waste plan with regards to composting.
Okay. Actually, we can start by saying, right now, we have not only citizen action on open space and bicycles, but we also have a very active citizen group participating in what we will call grassroots, no pun intended, compost work. And the person involved in that is Jim Sands. But I'm here more on the technical basis. Because the solid waste district sent forth a plan without the composting element in it. And the EPA said, we don't think that's a clerical error. We think that's a fatal flaw. So since we've already passed it, they would like to have us, the solid waste district will be meeting on Friday. I believe both, the planning committee, both Ray and I will be at the meeting. We'll pass it and send it back, but we have a timeline which will require it be up for reading, the revised plan with the composting in it, and both the composting in it, and we'll have to pass it under suspension to meet the timeline.
So you think you actually have that by next Monday?
Yes. Okay. So that's basically the structure. It's a very big oops, but anyway, we were so concerned about 90% in recycling. I actually wasn't there for that meeting.
Of course.
Never would have happened. Yeah, right. Anyway, that's my, so if there are any issues on that, I'll try and get it back to you on Monday so you can have a chance to read it, speed read it before council.
The composting group arose from a small group from AceNet Community Food Initiatives who began a small demonstration composting project and began to see that it really needed to be expanded to see if it was feasible. And so we've been looking at how we can involve Athens City, maybe other villages, cities, and the county, as well as CFI and other groups. And this would certainly give quite a boost to that effort if it were a recognized component of the district solid waste plan.
And you've been working at it quite a long time, haven't you?
Oh, it's been over a year, probably 18 months.
And it's really, I think, part of, again, the flavor of the place that recycling is what it is today because of citizens who initiated the activity way before it was in vogue. And we, I guess, sustain it even afterwards. But and it would have been Ed Newman and Tom O'Grady and Bob Eichenberg and Donna Goodman. People are still here doing the same thing, but they were the ones who started recycling. So now there'll be a new list of characters, but they're also
A lot of those characters are involved
in this as well. But it's the next frontier for us, and certainly something that we have to do. I mean, one of the issues for us is that we are quite advanced in our solid waste management, and we're part of a two-county system. And that, you can fill in the blanks in between that. And the other county is, sort of not quite up to the same, or not at the same point as we are, and that does create some issues once in a while. We do have some very interesting meetings, I can tell you that. Okay, before you, yeah.
Just to add to that, back to my sister project, so to speak, the hazardous waste collection plan, that's something that I'm still working with Ray Hazlett, looking into with a goal of next spring or summer having the first hazardous waste collection day in Athens. So that's still very much under discussion and looking at those possibilities and what the cost would be.
Yeah, just as by way of just supplementing that comment, I was reminded that both Licking and what's the other, Knox County are having that, and it's funded by the district. And so, just as the district gave money to Jim's group to do some seed money, our solid waste district gave money to do to subsidize it.
It was Licking and what else?
Licking and Knox counties.
Knox.
And so I think that the solid waste district might be persuaded, I mean, at least I hope, to, in some measure, participate in this.
Well, the suggestion or the discussion actually came out of the wellhead protection group, but it fits, in the greater plan in a lot of different areas, so.
So remember that, and we'll, they
Okay.
also are collecting tires, which is certainly a need in this area. Charging, I think. Green glass? I think they do collect green glass.
No, they don't, they lay it on your lawn.
Yeah. I take mine up to Knox County myself. All right. So, and then my last comment has to do with, and I'm going to just sandwich it in miscellaneous before you get to your miscellaneous, Jim. One of my constituents, who will remain nameless, said to me, I would like you to bring up the idea of prohibiting bands with amplifiers in residential areas. And so this is somebody who has a legal background. The exact name will be nameless. Everybody had a, I guess I'm the only one that got the note. And he would like to have us consider that at some future point. I mean, bands are one thing, but marching bands don't use amplifiers. I can usually hear the 110. And, yeah, I can hear the 110. I suppose part of the problem is, and this would be somebody who lives up on the hill, that the noise does come up the valley, although I didn't hear it. Maybe I wasn't home. Okay. Anyway, so for future, you may see something, we'll at least talk about it. All right, I'm through.
We do have another miscellaneous, Councilmember.
Yeah, I put in your boxes Resolution R0495 and Resolution, I think it was R0795. These are assessments of Kenny Drive. Kenny Drive is fixed, as I say, in 95, actually close to 97, I think it was finally done. I put that in there because I think this is one way to actually finance fixing Jeff Hill. One of the cogent arguments I've been hearing all the time is that the university owns both sides of it, and therefore they would be the most to benefit from any improvement of it. So as another way to think outside the box, rather than vacate it and give it to them, is to assess them for any repairs we have to do to it. I put this forward because we could always use the money, we could fix it, and we don't have to give it to them this way. The process would be, we do a resolution, we would have, if they contest it, you have to have an assessment board. The code, I have yet to read all this part of the Ohio Revised Code of it, but we can assess property owners by the frontage, by percentage, and or by property value, I believe. And I think it's Ohio Revised Code 727 chapter. And I put it out there. I might just start working on it if you think it's necessary and useful.
Questions? I think Jeff Hill will probably be back on our agenda in 2 weeks, committee meeting, so if you had some,
We have a committee meeting in 2 weeks, too.
excuse me?
Nothing, I was
Yeah.
just,
With regards to the issues that had arose last week, so be a good time to bring it
Okay.
up again. And then one quick miscellaneous, I'm going to ask the mayor to fill us in. I got an email from Steve Pearson, I don't know whether you all did, about Uptown Business Association promotion with banners, et cetera, on game days for businesses, which now discovered conflicts with some of our code issues. So there's been some discussion at the administration's level, I believe. You want to give us a brief overview of that?
Well, in the sign ordinance sections of the city code, there are restrictions on placing banners and flags and such outside of your building. You can do it in the display window without any problem, but placing outside technically is a violation of the city code. What the Uptown Business Association wanted to do was to, during the football season, have on displays outside on it. There is an exception in the code that allows for a special event type thing can be administratively given for it, but Steve's feeling was, since you're talking about not a one-time event such as homecoming, for example, you're talking about as many football Fridays as there is, he would feel more comfortable to either have, one, an input from council as to whether they felt that it was appropriate, or secondly, an actual change within the code itself, which would be more time constraints. from that standpoint. We did do, I granted to put flags where normally we have the American flag for this last Thursday, Friday game. In hindsight, that may have been a mistake, just from the standpoint that then spurred word to say, oh, well, the city's done that, we can put these things out, and so many more of them did. But from my way of thinking, I didn't really see a whole lot of problem with it either. But there were businesses that put flagpoles on top of their buildings, and, you know, the code is really kind of addressing height issues and obstructions, et cetera. But it opens somewhat a can of worms in a way that administratively we could probably make some rules to deal with it, but right now it's outside of our sign code that's there. And it just points out one of those things that code is very difficult, as we've already talked tonight, to write, to cover all situations. Yes, Paul?
This is in Title 23, so that would go through Planning Commission, right?
Right, but since there's the special event exemption that's there, and it gives the administration the right to do that, I would, at least without some degree of a committee discussion, saying that they would take this, you know, ask the Planning Commission to do it, or I can take it to the Planning Commission, but in the event for this year, do it that way, would be a little more forceful than just the administration going out there, and then that, in my mind, tends to then lead to further breaking of the code, because we've got a bit of that going on as it is, and if we would rigidly enforce the code in all cases, I mean, some of these different banners and things that come out periodically saying free lunch or free midnight breakfast, or a lot of these types of things that have kind of tended to creep along over the years, and all very well intended and good, but technically many of those are in violation. That you could do it, you know, up to a maximum of 3 times a year. The code reads about some of these, others it reads about for 90-day periods and only once a year. So there's a lot in the sign ordinance there that, are we really having a problem? Are we getting infringed on in little ways? And how much does code's really asking, and they're asking it through me, how rigid should I be in the enforcement of this? Should we be loose in it, or should we be follow the letter of the law?
And this would be mostly for football?
This is what's brought it to a head, but it does point out those other examples that I made. But there's nothing to stop the basketball coach from the athletic department to ask the same question in another season, too. And that's part of it, is where does it go? I mean, we have had the ability to have banners on our poles. We've done the Welcome to Athens for years. We put those over the Richland Avenue Bridge, and from time to time, people will ask for the 25th anniversary of the College of Medicine. Could we put those banners up, or for the 40th anniversary of the College of Fine Arts, or for football times, or athletic events? And so some of these things sort of grow because you loosen your rigid enforcement, I guess, of things. And say, well, that's appropriate, it makes common sense to do that, it doesn't really harm anything, and then gradually that happens. It's just like you have an ordinance out there on the books right now about tables and chairs on public sidewalks. And it's supposed to be only on Court Street, and the street has to be so wide, but then since that time, we've put tree pits in certain areas, so the street really isn't that wide. But more and more businesses, because they see it in a few places, they want to put it everywhere to give them extra seating too. And you get to a point where, at what point do you want to say enough is enough and go back, or do we want to review some of those overall ordinances? And what I'm suggesting is that if council wants to review a lot of those, because some of those, like the sign ordinance, would be go through a planning commission, some of the others might not, is that I could schedule a different committee meeting later on this year, Steve, to go through and say, these are the things that have crept in a little bit, like there's sideboards that people put out advertising the special and put it, it's okay if it's in your alcove, but if it's out on the city street, technically that's a violation. So we could have a real nice discussion with the business community and a lot of others about the overall issue that Steve is raising. And it's really one of permissiveness or not.
With the banners, the ones on the streetlights, do we put those up, or,
Yes, we do.
so we charge for them?
Well, all we put up is the Welcome to Athens banners and the ones in December and the holiday, and I think there's been a 4th of July banner back when we were doing more extensive 4th of July. Now, those are on the Richland Bridge. No, the university puts those up when they've
Those
done
are in
special
violation
events.
then?
Well, no, not really. I don't consider them to be in violation because it's a bracketed pole where we could display certain things. But the question, you fall back on other code things, and part of that is like the banners we do across Court Street. Okay? There are certain rules that are in there with respect to advertising. There's times because of a corporate sponsorship of an event, until it's up, we didn't even know that corporate logo was on there. Well, is that technically a violation of it because you've got the corporate logo in a smaller part being displayed there? You could interpret it that it would be. This can keep you busy for months.
Well, I guess I have a concern about if it becomes a very frequent occurrence. There was a problem 2 years ago with significantly oversized political banners that were hanging all over town, and code was, going around dealing with the size of different signs, and
That's a whole different issue.
it is, but I think if people get
It's winning
used
and
to
losing.
regularly hanging banners off of the front
Right.
of buildings and thinking that that's acceptable, I think it's
Right.
gonna
And
increase.
and to a very large degree, because of the changing of population, it keeps rotating through to that, they don't understand or know what those laws are. And so many times people are doing those not having any idea that there is or is not a law that covers that. Yes, Carol?
Would it be reasonable in the case of banners to suggest that it be a procedure like street closings or sidewalk sales where, there are official exceptions and they do come before council?
Yeah, that
To
could
be
be a
banned,
way
that might be
to do
one.
it. Yes, we used to do that with banners. Every banner went through city council until council got tired
January
about
would be a
20
great
years
time to
ago of
start
it.
that.
and delegated it to the administration.
I understand that, but the multiple banners for a big occasion sounds like a little bit different situation than every banner.
Yeah.
I can see, but, sorry, it wasn't on council when you were doing it.
It was terrible. It was trivial.
Nancy and I are the only ones that
It
remember.
was trivial and terrible, wasn't it?
The only thing, yeah, just one thing.
Go ahead.
The only thing I guess I could live with administrative discretion on the types of events where they're not one of a kind, but if they're in a series, and I can think of, if there were an art series, if there's a series of games that has a beginning and an end that's, you can kind of wrap your arms around, and it's not perpetual, like the perpetual garage sale or whatever thing like that. The other thing about the banners across is I think they serve a public good. And sometimes the only way that the entity gets the banner is that they accept the little things. I'm thinking, well, if it's the difference between communicating that information in that way or not, I'd rather opt towards communicating it and wink at the Pepsi sign or whatever it is, so. Anyway, I don't know if that helps, but you want to do that in a subsequent meeting?
Let's do it in
Oh,
January.
yeah, no, definitely a subsequent meeting, but I'm not
Until
I'm
then,
not sure
we
what the
can-
mayor is asking. Do you want a sense of council now, or you're comfortable with the
I'm
admin?
comfortable with the discussion. I think that since there has been a discussion with the Uptown Business Business Association and the administration about these issues, and they're asking us questions too, and we have to technically say, well, this is the way the law reads. There is a special exception clause, but we would feel comfortable at least having discussed that with city council for this year, and then if we feel there's a real problem and we need something to straighten out, then we'll go to council and try to do that.
I seem to hear council saying that maybe we don't have a real problem now, but we can see it expanding into something.
It
so
could get out of
that-
hand.
So that we would like to have that discussion, yes.
In January.
Okay.
Paul?
I lean kind of not in favor of it, but that's just my whole thing with signs. The important
Right.
signs get blocked out by the unimportant signs. And I know an event may be more important than a stop sign or a, walk light, but one will kill you and the other one won't.
Right.
So-
And I think we have to be cautious of that when we do those things.
Did you think we had enough football spirit this weekend? That we need more
I
banners?
think there was some positive football spirit, but I will remind you of those that were at least able to predict within the Athens Messenger, because I was the guest predictor. I was the only one that picked Ohio. There you go. Hey, you can be right sometimes.
He's riding the crest.
Thank you, Mayor.
Could I bring up one other thing? If we have that full-blown discussion, maybe the second Tuesday of next week or whenever it is, could we also
Second
talk
Tuesday.
about, and I've heard this from some of my friends who are in business, they feel that sometimes, and I'm not exactly in the same spot as Paul, but I do think that there's an unfair advantage in bannering that goes on our right-of-way when it's in the university area on Richland Avenue, for example, or when they put up a flashing sign for Ohio Valley Summer Theater or something like that, as they did a few years ago. And I heard specifically about that one. So I think the right-of-way is the right-of-way, and even if they want, even if, not they, but even if there is a request, it probably should go through the same procedures, because it's owned by this people, and I think they feel that if they put it up, they would have been put out of business right away. And,
Right.
and that was a while ago, but there's some other things like that that go on.
We'll,
So, yeah.
I'm making a list, we'll open this up and,
And Dale's enjoying this way too much.
yeah. Real quick, Paul, what were you going to say?
In terms of right-of-way use, one of the things I know that the bicycle group, the Spokes Council, I think there's our official title, would like to see more bike racks uptown and around businesses. They talk about how bad Kroger's is with theirs behind the house, the building, but there's very limited amount of space on the street, on Court Street, and they've been told that they can't put, and not that's enforced, again, they can't, lock their bikes to the parking meters or the trees, but we seem to have very few bike racks, and we have a lot of stuff that's cluttering up the sidewalks already, whether it's newsstands, and I know garbage cans have their necessities, and et cetera, but this would be
First
part of the
Amendment,
discussion I'd
First
like to hear.
Amendment.
Okay. It's on the list.
Aren't you?
Thank you.
Missed this?
What?
Any other miscellaneous?
Just wanna
Planning
tell
development,
Paul
I dare you.
We cannot change, I mean, last time we tried, we couldn't remove those boxes.
Oh, no,
First Amendment.
we've been through that.
Could put a bike rack on them, though.
Actually, there is
Like a
one chain to it right now.
combination.
The one
Oh,
in front of
okay.
Perks has been ripped out of the ground, the bike rack, but it's still there because it's attached to USA Today newspaper stand, so it's not moving.
Well, isn't that wonderful? First Amendment rights are protected.
Okay, Arts and Recreation Committee, Carol, it's you.
All right, I will try to be rapid. Here are some little handouts, 2-pagers. The two issues that I have, well, the first one concerns the fountain, and what I've passed to you is the financials on the fountain, which is a little mind-boggling. I